Greetings, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Soil Health Institute's 7th annual meeting, Scaling Up Soil Health. I am Dr. Latrina Staley, a soil scientist and Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Soil Health Institute. The Soil Health Institute is a nonprofit organization with a mission to safeguard and enhance the vitality and productivity of soil through scientific research and advancement. Our panel today is entitled SHI's Recommended Measurements for Scaling Soil Health Assessments. Our moderator for this session is Dr. Lakeisha Odom. Dr. Lakeisha Odom is the Scientific Program Director at the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. She is committed to promoting innovative science and interdisciplinary thinking to tackle today's complex challenges in food and agriculture. She also cultivates increased diversity in a new generation of food and agriculture scientists. Before her position at FAR, she was an early career intern for the Public Policy Board of the American Phytopathological Society and an American Association for the Advancement of Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the U.S. Department of Agriculture Biotechnology Regulatory Service. Dr. Odom, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Staley, and good morning to everyone in attendance. It's such an honor to be allowed to serve as a moderator for this exciting and dynamic panel. As mentioned, I am the Soil Health Scientific Program Director at FAR, and I've been in the role for 6 years now, and I've had the pleasure of engaging with Soil Health Institute and attending their annual meetings for all of my career at FAR. I've continually been impressed by Soil Health Institute's leadership and the breadth of challenges in soil health that SHI has prioritized. For those of you less familiar with FAR, I'll give a little bit of an overview. We're created in the 2014 Farm Bill through bipartisan support with the primary objective of increasing research funding in the ag sector by developing public-private partnerships. For every dollar of our corpus that we spend provided by the Farm Bill, we must find a non-federal one-to-one match. We fund across 6 strategic challenge areas, and one of those key areas is soil health. Within our soil health portfolio to date, we funded around $50 million in soil health and about $340 million across our 6 challenge areas with over 550 distinct partners. And it's my honor that Soil Health Institute has been one of those partners. Within my specific challenge area, Soil Health Institute has been a key partner. We've had opportunities to support research and partner with Soil Health Institute on a wide array of projects, from soil measurement work to understanding needs in areas like the soil health, human health connection. The topics covered by this conference around measurements and assessing scale, practical applications, adoption of practices, centering farmers, engaging with commodities, climate change mitigation, learning impact, and soil health education, as well as evaluation of soil health measurements, are all areas that we recognize at FAR are key priorities, and there are huge areas of overlap within our own soil health program. Each of these areas are key to addressing the need of the day scale. I've been in a number of conferences in the last few months, and that's just been something that has been top of mind in a lot of these separate conversations, is figuring out how we're going to address scale to meet the challenges of the day. And I applaud Soil Health Institute for ensuring that scale is mission critical for them. The series of discussions that I will moderate in this panel will continue to highlight the exceptional and critical role that Soil Health Institute is playing in the soil health sector, but I also believe these talks will provide some innovative recommendations for how we might move forward. I look forward to spending this time with you and moderating this program. So with no further ado, I'm about to introduce Dr. Wayne Honeycutt, but I have one quick personal story that I don't know if he knows about. So very early in my career, I was figuring out how to get strategic partners to the table and would someone be at the convening, and I was always worried about who was going to be in the room. And Wayne told me that the people in the room are the people that need to be in the room. And I don't know if he knows this, but whenever I get stressed out about partnerships, I hear his voice in my head saying the people in the room are the people that need to be in the room. So I just want him to know that that small piece of advice that he might have not even been paying attention to is something I refer to very often. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Wayne Honeycutt, who's the president and CEO of the Soil Health Institute, where he leads the Institute's programs to safeguard and enhance assess the vitality and productivity of soils. He previously served for 5 years as Deputy Chief for Science and Technology within USDA NRCS in DC, where he led programs in technology acquisition, development, and transfer to ensure NRCS conservation practices reflect the latest scientific advantages for conserving the nation's soil, water, air, plant, animal, and energy resources. And he will be sharing with us a conversation around strategic approaches for evaluating soil health. So I welcome and turn things over to Wayne, and I'll be back during the Q&A period. So make sure if you have any questions, you put those in the Q&A, and then we can have a rigorous discussion. I'll turn things over to you now, Wayne.
Great. Thank you very much, Lakeisha, for that kind introduction and also for that very sweet personal note. I very much appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen and get us going here. So I would like to start off today just by acknowledging a couple of things. One is that, there's been a lot of work that shows that there are tremendous on-farm and environmental benefits from adopting these soil health practices and systems. But at the Institute, we also feel it's really kind of unfair of anyone, including us, to ask farmers to manage something if we can't really tell them how to measure it, how to measure their progress. And of course, there have been a lot of research studies conducted that have used a lot of different measurements, and many of them have shown to be very, very useful. There's a lot of different individuals and organizations that have been working on this for years. I'm kind of harking back to the 1990s and early 2000s, where there was a real effort for promoting the concept of soil quality. And that was really quite popular, and people worked on a number of measurements for quite a while for that really kind of helped advance this science. And then NRCS, USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, in 2011, they launched a campaign, a soil health campaign called Unlock Secrets of the Soil, these secrets of the soil. And in that, I think what really kind of resonated with a lot of people was when one farmer said, anything can have quality, but only living things can have health. And I think that was just a very succinct way of, just kind of turning the focus on the fact, that this is a living, breathing entity, that there are livestock in that soil, that they might be microscopic livestock, but they're livestock, and therefore they need to be managed, they need to be fed, they need to be sheltered. And that's the way that you can ensure that these microbial processes and microbially mediated processes like building soil aggregates and enhancing nutrient turnover and availability to plants, all those benefits that we derive, from that microbial population in the soil can really, kind of be optimized through that proper management. And so there was a number of organizations that also, really kind of joined in with NRCS at that point. One particular called an effort called the Soil Renaissance, which was led by the Samuel Roberts Noble Foundation and the Farm Foundation. They started bringing a lot of different individuals, a lot of different experts together to debate and discuss, to identify some of the most effective soil health measurements. They put forth the cost, the expense, bringing people together, hiring an expert facilitator, all those things that are needed for that debate. And then as the Soil Health Institute was born in late 2015, then we became also kind of part of that debate. The Noble Foundation is actually the foundation that stood up the Soil Health Institute, along with the Farm Foundation. But then the whole time we were working also closely with USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, and other scientists from universities, people from labs, other scientists from USDA and all over. And as the Soil Health Institute started to get its legs at our first annual meeting in 2016, we had a number of those presentations that presented these straw papers, they were called, on the most effective measurements. And then we sent out a survey to all the participants and asked them their ideas of the most effective measurements. And so while this was all good, because now you have these experts giving their opinions based on their experiences, we also knew that there was some real serious, limitations. There was limitations on that when do you start to just base it on summarizing the data, or even if you combine all the data into one central database and do what's called a meta-analysis, just like it's all, in one database, that you're invariably combining a number of different things. You're combining different things like different measurements that may have been used from one study to the next. For any given measurement, people may use different methods of extraction, or different methods of different pHs that they measure their extraction in. I mean, all this can really affect the results. They were doing it in different labs, and different labs have different protocols, different ways of doing things. When you add a solution to soil and you mix it up to extract things like the nutrients, well, you're going to end up with something kind of muddy, right? Okay, well, now how are you going to clear that? Are you going to centrifuge it, or are you going to put it through filter paper? Some do one, some do the other. Okay, for those that do use the filter paper, well, did you acid wash it first? Because if you're going to now be measuring nitrogen, you should acid wash it because there's nitrogen in that filter paper. I mean, all these different little, details that the labs generally worked out, and work them for their lab, it really kind of becomes a bigger issue now when you're combining different studies that have now sent samples to different labs that have different ways of doing things. Soil sampling intensity and methodology in the field. Are you going to sample in the row? Are you going to sample between the row? Are you going to sample one of each? Maybe the between the row is wider than within the row. So are you going to sample the relative, surface area? I mean, all these little different decisions can influence your results and your interpretation of those results. Do you throw the sample on the dashboard of the truck where it bakes in the sun, or are you going to throw the sample in your cooler because it's a biological sample? Are you going to sample regardless, just whenever you can get out there in the field, which means it might be after fertilization, it might be after some tillage operation, or are you going to do it after the crop is grown, or are you going to do it in the spring, right before any type of tillage operations? And of course, again, when you combine all these different types of studies and try to then surmise what the most effective measurements is, now what you've done is inadvertently, you've combined all this variability. And that also includes many of these publications, they don't give you a lot of information on the inherent soil properties that they sampled, or the long-term management histories that were there. And so all of us, even though we participated, right, in developing like these lists of most effective measurements, we also knew what was really needed was a strategic approach where everything was done consistently, with the goal of identifying effective, widely applicable measurements of soil health. And so what we did was we basically were the beneficiaries with inheriting a list of a lot of different measurements that these groups, had identified. And of course, we evaluated those at the Soil Health Institute. We also added to them. And I won't go through all these. I won't do that to you, but obviously, there's a number of different chemical methods like cation exchange, total nitrogen. There are a lot of physical different methods in the soil health, because soil health is about chemical, physical, and biological. The physical components, things like water stable aggregation, particle size, bulk density, water holding capacity. But then we also included some of the more contemporary biological methods, things like phospholipid fatty acid analysis, 16S rRNA amplicon sequencing, metagenomic analysis. And we looked at also a number of the different analyses that are contained within some different kind of soil health management programs, what's called SMAF, or the Soil Management Assessment Framework, and the Cornell program, and the Haney test. And then we brought together a blue ribbon panel of scientists from USDA ARS, Agriculture Research Service, NRCS, a number of universities, soil test labs. And we debated for like about 2.5, 3 days, debated each of these methods that should be selected for a given measurement. Which way, for example, are you going to do pH? Steve Schaefer, this stately looking gentleman with the gray whiskers right here in the picture, He was our chief scientific officer at the time, and he was kind of famous at that meeting for saying, you get 12 soil scientists in a room and just ask them how to measure pH, and you get 13 different answers. And it's true. It's funny, but it's true. And it's because we all have our own experiences about what works, or what works for us, or what worked for the soils in which we were, most familiar with. And so what this challenge here was for this group to say, okay, now what could work across the United States? And eventually we came to what could work across all of North America, and made those hard decisions. But then we realized, again, we're one group. We don't know everything. We put it all out there. We put out a press release saying, here are the methods that we propose to use, that we plan to use. If you have any arrows to shoot at it, please shoot them now. And we got actually one good arrow. Well, we got, a couple of arrows. Some of them were not so well placed, but one of them was really well placed. They said, out in these Western soils at these high pH and these alkaline conditions, this other extractant works better. And we looked at that. We looked at it among ourselves, looked at the literature. We said, you're right. And so we made that change. So again, our goal was to identify effective, widely applicable measurements of soil health. Just kind of focus on the word effective for a second. One of the things that I mentioned, a kind of inconsistency of having sites, having different management. Now, a farmer, for example, may change their management a little bit, year to year, depending on the weather or what they learned the previous year. Of course, researchers, when they're conducting these long-term research sites, they have to lock in generally that they're going to do the same same management practices year after year for a given plot in order to have that consistency for their analysis. And so we wanted to go for those long-term agriculture research sites that had been in place for at least 10 years, because again, in identifying an effective measurement, we wanted to make sure that enough time had elapsed for us to identify whether or not that measurement is effective. And so again, these sites have that long-term continuous management history, but then they also provide that replication, that experimental design, to allow us to come to that appropriate statistical conclusion whether or not each of these measurements was effective. Now, focusing in on part of the goal of the measurements that are also widely applicable. These maps here are identifying the different colors, are different soil orders for the US, Canada, and I'm pretty sure these are soil orders in Mexico, but I could not find evidence of that. But they're definitely different soils that are shown by the different colors in Mexico here from 3 different maps. And so you can obviously see, let's just look at the US. There's a lot of different colors, a lot of different soil orders. I think we covered some 7 of the 12 soil orders that exist. We covered 7 of them in this project. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar with it, a soil order is just kind of the highest level of classification. So it's the broadest level, the most inclusive level. And so by having all these different colors here, all these different soil orders, tells you that we were having very, very different soils that we covered. It goes way, beyond from the starting at this kind of the order level being highest, and then the suborder, then the great group, the subgroup, the family classification, then the series classification. Each of those levels, you dig deeper and deeper, you get more distinguishing, on the features of the soil. And so my point is that we really covered a wide range of soils in each of these countries. And so then our next step was to issue a request for applications, an RFA, for long-term research sites to participate in this project. And so we asked for sites that had a management history of at least 10 years. We asked them to describe their experimental design, to describe their treatments, things like, with physical disturbance, like were they comparing, for example, no-till versus moldboard plow, whether or not they had cover crops, all these types of different treatments or management practices. And we were not passive about this. Yeah, we put out announcements requesting information, but we also knew of certain long-term sites that had not responded. And so we reached out to them. We went to organizations that we knew had under their purview a number of these research sites. And so we got in front of them, made presentations to their scientists, telling them about, what we were up to and asking them to volunteer to participate. And we were very fortunate that we had, again, that 154 that applied to participate. And that panel that we brought in, a technical panel that we brought in to review all of them, ended up identifying 124 that we felt like would be very applicable for this particular project, very appropriate for it. Now, the colors on the map on the left, basically this is something called a Hargreaves a moisture deficit index. It's basically kind of a combining temperature and moisture. So the different color schemes are basically telling you where you have more hot and dry and where you have more cool and moist. And so that's basically what that's all about. And then the black dots indicate, where those 124 long-term experimental sites are. And so in addition now to the appropriate statistical design we get from the long-term sites, the documented management histories, and all these different treatment comparisons, that can influence soil health, things like, did they use cover crops? Did they disturb the soil? All those different treatment comparisons. Now you can see that we also got a range of sites that contributed a lot to quite a range in climate. With mean annual temperature varying from 37 degrees Fahrenheit to 77 degrees Fahrenheit per year on an average. Mean annual precipitation ranging from about 6.5 inches of rain per year to almost 70 inches of rain per year. So wide ranges of climate that were covered. The sites, of course, contributed to a range of production systems because each of these research sites also was using some of their local production systems that were predominant in that area. And they also contributed to a range of management practices. When you added them all up, it's some 689 different treatments that were covered here. And then, of course, I've already pointed out that they contributed to a range of inherent or pedogenic soil properties. Now, just kind of an example of just a little bit of the data to kind of emphasize that range of soil properties. This is what's called the textural triangle, where you look at the different percentages of sand, silt, and clay. And so the way you read this is just by going across the same angle as the numbers. So let's just take this point of clay right in the middle. That's some about 50% clay and about 25% silt and about 25% sand. Takes you to that point right there. So you can see that we covered clay, silty clay loam, silt loam, silt, clay loams, loam, sandy clay loam, sandy loam, loamy sand, sand. We covered them all the way from about 4 or 5% sand. I'm sorry, 4 or 5% clay. Whoops, all the way up to about 65% clay. Silt range from about 25% silt to about 85% silt. Sand range from about 5% sand up to about 90% sand. So a wide range of soil properties and soil properties that we covered in the project. So these are the scientists that were hired to work on this project, to lead this project. And it was just a real honor and just extremely exciting to just work with such an enthusiastic, bright, creative, energetic group of mostly early career scientists. And so again, we identified and selected those 124 sites. So then what we needed to do was have an organizational meeting with nearly all the scientists that participated. And this gave us an opportunity to not only have some breakout sessions for each of our SHI scientists that would be working with a subset, each of them were assigned a subset of these, to be the liaison, to go sample, to work with them on getting their management data, understanding their plots, gaining access to their field sites. All those types of logistics need to be worked out for each and every site. But it also gave us an opportunity for having those sometimes easy discussions and sometimes hard discussions with a group like this on things like, okay, well, no one likes to talk about it, but let's go ahead and talk about it. Like, what are we going to do for publications? You all have invested all your time and effort and money, sometimes for decades, on these particular research sites. And so we don't want to just come in and just take. We want to participate and partner with you and give with you. And so we had those good conversations that needed to be had on the publication expectations. And okay, when we send a draft out to everybody that's going to be on the publication list, if you now are going to be on the list, now you need to at least put your eyes on it, review it, put your input, help write it, help analyze the data, do quality control on the data, all these things. But when we send you something, you need to get back to us in 2 weeks, because one person could foot drag and slow everybody down. And so we agreed on those types of guidelines and say, okay, well, if you don't get back to us in 2 weeks, now your name goes to the acknowledgement section. And I mean, so we agreed on some of those hard things that are needed in order to really move the project forward. So we ended up with a lot of consistency, not only with how we did things, with our management histories, and but also particularly with our sampling protocol. In the spring, we decided that we were going to sample in the spring for those places that froze between spring thaw and any spring field operations, and every other place that didn't have a freeze. And we were just going to do it in the spring before field operations. And we were successful at doing that at 100% of the sites in Canada, 96% of the sites in the US, and 78% of the sites in Mexico. We created, agreed upon things like the depths of sample, how many subsamples in a plot, how we were going to walk across the plot, to assure that we got a representation of the soil in that plot. And is it a zigzag pattern? How many samples within a row, between the row, all these things that you need to decide upon, but that now can be done uniformly across all these studies, across all these sites, I should say, so that you don't, interfere, so you don't introduce that human variability that could influence the results. We even sterilized tools between plots because we were taking microbiological samples. We shipped those samples in coolers and stuff like that. There's a lot more detail available on our website, but also in a manuscript by Norris et al. And when this comes out, when we put this, publish this, you can just click on that, or you can just go to our website and find that Norris et al. Paper. One of the things that we were just so not only pleased with, but honored by, just was the level of excitement and participation from all of our partners. I mean, so many of them, they would send out their students, their technicians to help. They wanted to be part of really advancing the science. So just in kind of a quick summary, we ended up with 124 long-term research sites with at least 3 replications. There was a couple of them that were not, like some of the historical sites, like in Breton, Alberta, that had been in place for some 90 years. And then the Sanborn field sites that had been in place in Missouri had been in place for, like, I think it was 131 years at the time that we were sampling. They were not replicated, but they're of such historical significance that we wanted to include them. But anyway, we had this documented management histories of all the sites, even weather, even yield. And so we followed the consistent protocols from the sample collection, the handling, shipping, the timing when the sampling was done. For any given measurement analysis, it was all done in the same laboratory. We used 5 different labs, but any given lab was using just a handful of specific measurements that they were analyzing for us. Using all these consistent methods and protocols for the measurements. Again, we covered a lot of different treatments and physical disturbance, cover crops, et cetera. and then wide ranges of climate production systems, management practices, and inherent soil properties. And just if you think that no tillage doesn't make a difference, this picture here on the right is in Kentucky, where on the left is a no-till plot adjacent to, on the right, a conventional plot done in the spring. And this was, Tim's picture was taken in the spring, so some of the stalks and stuff have fallen over. But look at the height difference in that soil from that long-term no-tillage operation. This was kind of a degree of a reference for me because I sampled those same plots in 1980 as a graduate student when they had been in place for 10 years. And now it's exciting to have our scientists go back and sample them again so many years later. Really want to thank not only all of our partners, all of our staff at the Institute that are participating on this, but particularly also for the support of the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, Samuel Roberts Noble Foundation, and General Mills, without which none of this would have been possible. So I'll turn it over to you, Lakeisha. I believe I may have gone a little bit long, so I don't know if there's any time or not, but I'll turn it back to you.
I think we will at least have time for, there are 2 questions in the chat, and I think if you can answer them quickly, we'll have time.
Okay.
So the first question was around the Soil Health Institute. Has there been an identified minimum data set of parameters to evaluate soil health?
Yes, we have identified a minimum data set, and actually that's going to be the topic for the next 4 presentations. You're going to hear from a couple of scientists, 3 scientists that are going to be talking about kind of the scientific basis for how they evaluated each of these measurements. And then it's going to culminate with Dr. Christine Morgan, who's going to be kind of talking to you about our filter that we've used for identifying kind of that minimal suite of effective and recommended soil health measurements.
Perfect. And then the second question that was for you was, did any of the sites indicate that they had implemented livestock grazing, even if infrequently, for forage or weed management?
There were a couple of sites on the rangeland side that had done it. I can't remember just how many or which ones right now with 124 sites, but I'm sure one of our scientists could probably answer that if you want to ask it again in one of the next sessions, because they're the ones that kind of live and breathe the data. I'm the fortunate recipient of it.